Let's talk about investing in comics in the current market. Where do I start with this? I've had so many people comment in my comments lately, and I've been in Facebook forums and reading people's posts, and they're like, with everything skyrocketing right now, it's like, what should I buy or should I not even? Like, it's, there's a lot of emotion to what's going on with comics right now. I think we can obviously focus on blue chip keys. We can focus on any type of spec book that gets hot. And once it gets hot, I mean, it gets flaming hot. 9.8s. 9.8s continue to double and quadruple in value. So while many will tell you it's people manipulating the market, it's shill bidding. It's just people shill bidding. If you want to hear my take on that, go watch that video. Yes, shill bidding exists, but I'm not even going to go down that rabbit hole. This is how I want to approach this topic and how I think we need to address this before we dive into the details of where we're at today, like post-COVID, or not post-COVID, but in COVID right now, right? 1 year into this. Because a lot of people are going to sit there and they're going to say, oh, it's just because of COVID. It's because people aren't working and they're getting stimulus checks or bonus unemployments and payments, and they're just spending it on comic books. Before we get into that, I need everyone to understand that they need to look at the comic book market pre-COVID. I did a video a couple days ago talking about 5 Avenger books and what they did since the characters in those books debuted in the MCU. I did first appearance of Vision, first appearance of Falcon, and we looked at numbers, and I broke it down. I said, this is what it was at before their debut in the MCU. This was the rough fair market value. And then I did the year after their movie debut, and I did value for that. Then I did a pre-COVID 2020 fair market value, where I took the year from 2019 to March 2020 and computed a fair market value for that time period. And then I did fair market value for the last 12 months. All right. When you look at pre-COVID comic book market, you have to understand that the market was already trending in this direction. The comic book market was already trending in the direction that it's going right now. All right. Did COVID help? Absolutely. I have to look at all the variables and say, yes, COVID helped. And not just because people are getting stimulus and they're just blowing in on comic books, but because people don't have the same expenses that they did pre-COVID. Talked about this before. People aren't out dining out all the time. People aren't spending gas. Like, look, my commute, my work, the school that I work at is literally 10 miles away from me. And I was spending a couple $100 plus on gas every month. You know how many times I put gas in my truck over the last 12 months? Twice. And I have an old truck, and it's only a 15-gallon tank. Twice I put gas in my truck over the last 12 months. People are working from home. People aren't going to the movies. So there is a lot more expendable income that's being put into other things. All right. But you have to look at pre-COVID market. The pre-COVID collectors market, especially with comic books, was already on the up and up. 2019 was a booming year for Diamond in the publishers themselves. And that's not even considering the secondary market, right? So when people ask me, should I get into comic books right now? Should I invest right now? Is it just a bubble? My answer will be, it's doing the same thing that it's been doing for years. Does that make sense? It's doing the same thing that it's been doing for years. And I'll go back to the 90s. And that the 90s was this big crash. And yes, a lot went tumbling down. But if you look at the blue chip key market, it held strong. I've talked to shop owners that lasted through the 90s, through the turmoil. And they said the thing that kept me going was back issues. So I know it's tough for a lot of people right now to come into this hobby and look at certain prices. There are countless books that have been dollar bin books for decades that are now $10, $15, $20. There are books that you could get standard back issue books for $3 to $5 that are now $15, $20, $25. So I understand that it's kind of deflating, but if you want to be in this hobby, you have to ask yourself this: is it worth it? Right? So if you want to go take a trip somewhere, right, and you're worried about the price of gas, man, I remember when gas prices were $1.50. Now it's $3.50 a gallon. So that means, are you going to get in your vehicle and drive around? You may be more cautious of how many miles you drive, but look, you're not going to be stuck in your house all day long. You're going to go drive. You're going to pump gas and fill your tank up if you want to go somewhere. And my point is this: if you want to collect comic books, you can't look at the current market and have a negative outlook. Just don't be here. And I'm not telling anyone not to be here. I want everyone to be here. But if you're going to get into it and have a negative outlook about it, maybe it's not for you. If you're not willing to go take that trip down to the ocean, whether it's a day trip or stay the night, and you're not willing to spend the cost of gas, then don't go. Stay in your house and enjoy binge watching something on Netflix. If you're not willing to come into this hobby and pay the prices of where these books are at now, then maybe you shouldn't come into the hobby. Because what we don't need in this hobby is folks coming into it, dishing out money, thinking it's one thing, and then looking back at their decisions and saying, man, it's freaking a bloated market. It's shill bidding. It's people manipulating the market. It's YouTubers manipulating the market, or an app manipulating the market. And I can't get books that I just want to read anymore, right? This is making me not be able to get books because I just want them to read them. If you're going to do that, think about getting into knitting or something, or I don't know, all right? Or maybe you should just read People magazine. But hey, even People magazines are like, what, $8.90 these days? You got to consider inflation as well, folks. That's a real thing in anything that we're purchasing, right? So that's my number one point. The market is healthy. And this is what I say all the time as well. As a collector who owns a lot of books, I know that it may be tough for me to get my hands on books that I don't have. Look at Uncanny X-Men 266. Right before COVID hit, I was right there. I put it on my 2021 want list. Or 2020 want list. And I was right there. I almost bought a 9.4 for $120 off of the Mercari app. But I made an offer for like $105 and they didn't accept it. And I said, I'm good. Nah, I don't even want to pay about $100 for this book in this grade. I said, I'm good. Now, a 9.4, you're probably looking at least twice that. At least twice that. So, what does that do to me as a collector? I'm mad at myself for not pulling the trigger when I did, but it's okay. Because guess what? It shows the market is healthy. And if the market is healthy for books that I don't own, then the market is healthy for all of these books that I do own, right? So why am I going to get mad that the market is on an upward trend? I have 18,000 books that I'm sitting on, that I don't have to do any work and the market is doing the work for me. So let's go back to the question. Is it worth it to get into this hobby and invest in comic books right now? The bottom line is you got to know what you're in it for, and you got to be willing to take the risk. The one thing that is never certain is the future. And just like any market, nothing is guaranteed. You know? And we still are unclear of how we're going to come out of this COVID thing. I think we're going to be fine. I think we're going to be essentially fine as an overall industry. I think there's going to be some cool off periods, but I always say this: don't be scared of ebb and flow. When folks, this is what your stockbrokers and stuff would tell you when investing in stocks. Don't panic. When the stocks start dropping, when the market isn't doing well, don't panic. Hold steady, because it's going to happen. Every market has ebb and flow and peaks and valleys. And I know if you come into the market late and you're paying a premium for a book and it drops, I know it's gut-wrenching. It can cause a lot of anxiety. It really can. Watching the stock market, watching the comic book market day in and day out, if it's doing this or even this, it can be gut-wrenching. I get that. If it's doing this, you're like, all right, like you're on a constant high. But if it starts doing this and you start seeing that negative red, I get it. But don't panic. That's what I think is going to happen in the near future with some of these key books that have really gotten hot. I mean, let's talk about Ultimate Fallout 4. Let's talk about Ultimate Fallout 4. Ultimate Fallout 4, what did it pass? In a 9.8, it passed 3,000, I believe. Triple of what it was about a year ago when folks said it ain't gonna hold. Remember when it hit 1,000 and folks were like, it ain't gonna hold? 3K plus, right? Do I think that this comic book has the potential to decrease? Absolutely. I do. But I always talk about thresholds. This book, in my humble opinion, will never be close to $1,000 book anymore in that 9.8. But here's another thing. When a market wants to not bottom out, but take a dip, all right, you have other things that could come back and help impact the market on an upward trend. And for this character, that's something that can happen for a long time to come, because we have Into the Spider-Verse 2 coming out. We might have another video game, and we might see Miles in the MCU sooner than later. So when you think about this book having cool-off periods, it can. But I think those cool-off periods are going to be so minimal in terms of how many other variables are going to keep popping up to keep pushing this book up higher and higher and higher. All right. You have other situations like West Coast Avengers 45, you know, that I think it's more volatile. I definitely think that book is going to cool off quicker, just depending on the role of White Vision in the future, depending how long we don't know when we're going to see him again. It might be maybe 3 years before we see him in the MCU again. It might be next year in Multiverse of Madness. We don't know. And that's going to depend. If we don't see White Vision again for a couple years, that book, again, in my humble opinion, it's going to cool off some. Will it ever be a $5, $10, $15 book ever again? I don't think so. That's raw copy, obviously. So again, we go back to the question. Should I invest in comics? You have to be willing to take the risk. And I talk about this all the time. Now let's go to this. The other question is this, and then I'm going to get to some comments here in a minute. The other question is this: how should I invest? So it's the if I should get into comics, and then it's the how I should invest. The only thing I need to tell you guys is this. It's like buying a car. I like when I'm looking, for me, I like cars. I like trucks. I like Ford trucks. I like classic Ford trucks, like mid 80s to older. But I like the new trucks too. The new, like the last few years, the Ford trucks, man, like dual cab. I'm loving them. I hope to have me one day. My truck is an old 89 Ford Ranger, right? But it does the job. I like old school Chevelles, but I also like modern sedans. I love the new Camrys and the Toyota Camrys and the Honda Accords. Man, they're clean, man. They're clean. Leather seats, sunroof, you know, new fresh all the high-tech stuff, right? So when I go out to buy a car, what do I ask myself? Well, the first is, what do I like? What do I like? I want me like a 1970 Chevy Chevelle, right? That's what I want, souped up, candy painted or something like that. Or I want me a brand new 2021 dual cab Ford F-150, right? Limited, right? Can I buy that? I don't know. I got to look in my wallet. I can't afford those things. So it's the same thing. How should I invest? Well, can you afford a Hulk 181? Because if you can, even though it's as high as price as it is right now, if I had the money to buy one, I'd buy it. I'd buy it. But guess what? I don't. So here's the thing though. I'm good. If I need a car and I go to the car lot and I see the 2021s Ford F-150s, I might hop into one and smell it, feel it, be like, all right. I might go hop over to that brand new Toyota Camry Sport, hop in, feel the leather seats, see all the GPS and the surround sound speakers and the heated seats and like voice activation and cars that could drive themselves and all this stuff. But I'm going to hop out of that car and I'll probably go find me like a 2008 Honda Accord that has like 200,000 miles on it because that's all I can afford. But I'm going to be happy with that because it's still to my preference. It's the same thing with collections. I can't go and buy a Hulk 181, or I can't go buy a giant size X-Men #1. So what do I buy? I spend $20 on a Marvel Team Up annual #1 to get at least an early appearance of the new X-Men team, because that's what I can afford. I don't have Amazing Spider-Man #101, the first appearance of Morbius, because I can't afford it. So I'll go spend $20 on a Marvel Team Up #3 that has the third appearance of Morbius because it's what I can afford. So again, it really comes down to this. What do you like and what can you afford? What do you like and what can you afford? And if you end up spending money on something that you regret, or you end up spending money and it's money that you didn't have, and now you can't pay your car note, right? Or you're short on rent, and you want to hop into a Facebook group and blame it on, market manipulation, or it's those damn flippers or speculators ruining the hobby. Do yourself a favor, go take a couple deep breaths and look in the mirror and say, it's on me. It's on me. There is something out there for everyone in this hobby. There's something out there for everyone. Comic books are meant to be enjoyed in so many different ways. We read the stories and fall in love with the characters. We look at the art and fall in love with the artists. We fall in love with the writers. We collect floppy issues. We collect trade paperbacks. We read digital. Then we go and watch the cartoons and the movies. And then we come back to the books. We love going to the comic shops and talking shop. We love coming here and hanging out. And you guys listen to me ramble on. There's superhero genres. There's mystery genres. There's horror genres. There's romance genres. There's comedy genres. There's sci-fi. There's fantasy. There's young reader. There's mature reader. There's something here for everyone. And although for someone like me who collects runs, it is tough. It's tough for me to think about completing some of these runs. I might not ever do it because the market keeps going up. But guess what? I'm spoiled. I have 18,000 comics. If I can't fill a run because a couple issues are priced out of my price range, am I really going to complain about that? I'm like Scrooge McDuck swimming in comic books. And I'm going to complain because I don't have UF4, could buy it when I could for 50 bucks. I'm so happy for everyone that bought that book that's able to either flip it right now and make money on it. And that goes to any book that I don't own. And I'll keep doing what I do. And guess what? I'll keep after my Amazing Spider-Man 101 or my Amazing Spider-Man 50s. And one day I really hope to have an Amazing Spider-Man #1. But guess what? Until I have it, I'm not going to blame anyone else. And I'm going to keep enjoying this hobby the only way I know how. And I encourage all of you to do the same. Make sure you make smart decisions. Find out what you like. Find out what you like. If you like to invest, if you like to take risks, if you like to speculate and flip, if you like to read, if you like the art, just find out what works for you. Find out what genres you like, what artists you like, what writers you like. Find out if you don't mind reading digital copies to where you could, because you don't want to take the space of hoarding physical books. All of these things matter, and it really depends on you. And you just have to ask yourself the right questions and allow yourself to tell yourself, I'm enjoying this hobby the best way that I know how.